And who will join this standing up? And the ones who stood without sweet company will sing and sing back into the mountains, and if necessary, even under the sea. We are the ones we have been waiting for. In the name of the living God, amen. Let's be seated. In 1956, 20,000 women from across the spectrum of race and ethnicity from all across South Africa converged on the Prime Minister's office in Pretoria. Apartheid as government policy was officially only 8 years old, but separation, discrimination, the violence of othering was way older than that. You see, we are experts at apartheid. We are expert at dividing ourselves from each other. We are expert at sowing seeds of distrust and doubt that prevent us from coming together. We are expert at convincing ourselves that the world that is the only world that can be. And the National Party of South Africa, which had learned apartheid at the feet of the West and our own genocide and partition of the indigenous peoples of these lands, well, they were a quick study. They knew that by restricting and dividing the people, they could maintain power in the hands of a few. That separation led to othering and fragmenting and fearing and demonizing of those you did not know and never had a chance to understand. You see, the problem with apartheid is unchallenged, it works. Separation, segregation cuts us off from the most powerful agent of social transformation, each other. And so in the mid-1950s, the National Party sought to expand this policy by including women, all women, in the pass laws that restricted movement throughout the country. But the women were wise. They knew that they could not allow the government to keep them from coming together. They knew their greatest strength was each other, so they organized, one person at a time, going door to door throughout all South Africa and listening. And the women of South Africa shared their stories with one another. Stories of high rent or no money for food. Stories of living in fear of their husbands dying, because when a woman's husband died, she would be chased out of the house or told to get another husband, because only married women could have houses. The women crossed borders to sit with one another, listen to one another, weep and laugh with one another, and together they found beauty and joy and power. Together they built a movement, and they knew that they could not allow themselves to be separated from each other. They knew that together they had the power to birth a new South Africa, even if few or none of them would ever live to see it. And so, in August 1956, 20,000 of these women converged on Pretoria, carrying petitions with signatures of hundreds of thousands more, demanding to see the Prime Minister and voice their opposition. One of the movement's leaders, Francis Bard, tells the story. The secretary told us that we were not allowed in because we were black and white together. Then we walked outside again and joined the other women who were waiting in the amphitheater. All the women were quiet. 20,000 women standing there, some with their babies on their backs, and so quiet, no noise at all, just waiting. What a sight. So quiet and so much color. Many women in green, gold, and black, the ANC colors, and Indian women in their bright saris. Then we stood in silence for half an hour. Everyone stood with their hands raised in the salute. Silence. And even the babies hardly cried. For half an hour, we stood there in the sun, and not a sound, just the clock striking. And then we began to sing. I'll never forget the song we sang then. It was a song especially written for that occasion. It was written by a woman from the Free State. It went, "Watent abafasi, watinti imbokodo." That means, you strike the women, you strike the rock. 22 years later, with apartheid still thriving in South Africa and indeed around the world, Jamaican poet June Jordan stood at the United Nations and commemorated the anniversary of that 30 minutes of deafening, defiant silence with this poem that concludes, "And the babies cease alarm as mothers raising arms and heart high as the stars go so far unseen, nevertheless hurl into the universe a moving force, irreversible as light years traveling to the open eye. And who will join this standing up? And the ones who stood without sweet company will sing and sing back into the mountains, and if necessary, even under the sea. We are the ones we have been waiting for." Watint abafasi, watinti imbokodo. You strike the woman, you strike a rock. We are the ones we have been waiting for. We are experts at apartheid, and the church is no exception. In fact, we as the church have been in the apartheid business for nearly 2,000 years. And this morning's gospel reading, it's Exhibit A. God so loved the world as to give the only begotten, that whoever believes may not die but have eternal life. There is perhaps no greater example of how we have weaponized the teachings of Jesus to create our own apartheids of separation and domination than what's been done to John 3:16. We've all heard it. Beautiful people of many faiths and questioning journeys have been condemned by it. Many of us in this very room have been wounded by it. The using of John 3:16 to proclaim the ultimate apartheid. Choose Jesus and live, choose anything else and die. Or, more specifically, pledge yourself to a Jesus carefully curated by the church to support its social, political, and above all economic agenda and go to heaven, or choose anything else and go to hell. Now, there's only one problem with this translation of John 3:16. It's complete and total crap. And I got a list. So first of all, it's not about belief. It's about trust. The Greek word there is pisteuo, not an intellectual assent to a dogmatic statement, but deep and total commitment to relationship. Bonds of love that are stronger than fear. That's what Jesus is about. Deep trust in relationship with God, with each other. Second, it is not about heaven and hell, about life forever or an endless void. The word translated here as eternal is aioninos. I'll get that right. Now, it doesn't mean going on forever and ever. You know, going on and on forever and ever is rarely a good thing, as listeners of sermons will surely attest. Aionios means unbound. Unbound. It is a quality of life beyond space and time, a way of being unbounded in abundance and richness. Imagine you're holding a peach just at the peak of its ripeness. You're holding it in its hand. Now you hold it to your nose. Don't touch your face. Hold it to your nose and breathe in the aroma until your mouth starts to water in anticipation. Now you open your mouth as wide as it will go and take an enormous bite and feel the flavor explode into your mouth, the juice dripping down your chin, the sweetness and just a hint of tartness at the corners of your mouth, filling you with the most extraordinary sensations. Are you with me? Yeah. Now imagine life like that. That's the life that Jesus is talking about. That's what God is offering us. Life unbounded. Life of infinite breadth and depth, of healing and joy. Not somewhere someday after you die, but right here, right now. Now look at the next line. God sent the chosen one into the world not to condemn the world, but that through the only begotten the world might be saved. You think we might have taken a look at that line as Christians were using this passage to condemn most of the world's population to hell? God sent the chosen one into the world not to condemn the world, but that through the only begotten the world might be saved. Now, if you were in the Rector's Forum a couple weeks ago, you heard Pauline scholar Mark Nanos talk about that word, saved. For nearly 2,000 years, the church has used this word to divide and condemn. But the word does not mean saved as the opposite of lost. The Greek word here is sozo, which means to heal, to keep safe, to make whole. Healing the world, keeping everyone safe, dismantling apartheids and making the human family whole. That's the gospel. That's the good news of Jesus Christ. And yet the Jesus movement that began as a movement of unbounded life, healing, and revolutionary love for all, through the church has become just one more apartheid government, using Scripture and the teachings of Jesus to divide and control. And it began early. The community that wrote this Gospel of John was itself an apartheid community, which had begun to draw the lines of who's in and who's out with fellow members of the Jewish community. And as the Gospel was edited, the language of separation and judgment became cemented in the text. And empires of every stripe have been more than happy to partner with us in an unholy exchange of principle for privilege, to feed and to feed on our fears, to separate us from one another. One final thing about this gospel. John's gospel was written to respond to a very specific crisis. The temple in Jerusalem had been destroyed, and the Jewish people were thrown into chaos. You see, the temple was where God's presence rested. This was the people's assurance that God was with them right there. So even when they were under foreign occupation and oppression, they knew that they had not been abandoned because there was the temple. Only now it was gone. And they were left to wonder in despair, where is God now? Where is God if the temple is gone? Where is God as we are being threatened on every side? The entire purpose of the Gospel of John is to address that question. And what does John's Gospel say? Where does God reside without a temple? John's answer is right here in the gathered community. The Word became flesh and dwelt among us. That's how John's Gospel starts. In the end, Jesus looks down from the cross and says, "Woman, behold your son." And then to his friend, "Behold your mother." Mutuality, trust, love, healing. And then after that, the resurrected Christ stands on the shore with Peter and says, "Do you love me? Well then, feed my sheep." Where does God reside? Right here in the gathered community. We are each other's greatest strength. We are the ones we have been waiting for. God dwells in us. God dwells in you. And how big is that community? How big is that we? It is as unbounded as the life, love, and healing the revolutionary Jesus longs for us to embrace. Unbounded by fear, unbounded by prejudice, unbounded by all the ways the powers of this world attempt to divide and distance and turn us against one another. The dream of God is unbounded life, love, and healing in unbounded community. It's why the one sign Jesus offered was not the cross or the empty tomb, but the open table, the place where all come together, whoever you are and wherever you find yourself, and not just in here either, but out there. It has perhaps never been more important both to extinguish the apartheid gospel that has dominated Christianity in this nation and around the world, and also to proclaim the ancient new narrative of unbounded life, love, and healing in unbounded community. Over the past 40 years, we have become more and more segregated as a nation. At every level, we are driven by fear of each other, fueled by lack of connection with each other. And we're all a part of it. We've seen it this week. A virus, an election, an economic crisis. Any of these things and more threaten to be our undoing if we approach them with the false gospel of apartheid. And if you haven't noticed, that's exactly what we're being tempted to do. To separate ourselves from one another, to defend ourselves against one another, to hoard at the expense of one another. I mean, have you tried to find Purell this week? And yet there's another way. There's a better way. A way where these challenges can be our salvation if we refuse to be divided anymore. If we remember that our greatest strength is in each other. If we trust that we are the ones we have been waiting for. And we begin just as those women did more than 60 years and half a world away. Crossing borders to sit with one another, to listen to one another, to weep and laugh with one another, and together we will find beauty and joy and power. Together God will be revealed in our midst. Together a movement will emerge and the apartheids of church and nation will fall. Together with friends we have not yet met, with strangers who will become our teachers, we will learn and proclaim the ancient new narrative of Christ's love. One that does not mimic the apartheids of the world, but walks with the revolutionary Jesus, loving without judgment, doing justice courageously, embracing all life joyfully, reverently inviting all faiths and peoples into relationship for the healing and transformation of ourselves, our community, and the world. Because it's not about right belief. It's about deep trust. It's not about heaven or hell. It's about unbounded life. It is not about some saved and some lost. It is about healing and safety and wholeness for all. And as we proclaim that gospel, we will hurl into the universe a moving force, irresistible, irreversible as light years traveling to the open eye. 20,000 women stood in silence, arms raised, with babies on their back in the South African sun. And together they sang, Watint abafasi, watinti mbokodo. You strike the women, you strike the rock. As always, the women are our leaders and our teachers. And they stand longing for us to join them. And who will join this standing up? And the ones who stood without sweet company will sing and sing back into the mountains, and if necessary, even under the sea. We are the ones we have been waiting for. Amen.